3 days after she fired me, 17 Department of Defense facilities went into emergency containment mode. Data partitions sealed. Command authentication revoked. Network traffic rerouted through encrypted fallback nodes. And by 2:14 a.m., the Pentagon was demanding answers. But that's not where this story starts. It starts with a laugh. A very confident laugh. My name is Dr. Natalie Grant. I've spent the last 15 years designing adaptive cyber defense systems for critical U.S. infrastructure. I don't build apps. I don't optimize ad algorithms. I architect systems that keep power grids running and classified data from falling into the wrong hands. I don't look for recognition. I don't want headlines. I prefer server rooms to stages. The morning everything changed began like any other. I arrived at Vanguard Defense Technologies at 6:42 a.m., coffee in hand, badge clipped to my blazer. The lobby lights were still dim. The cleaning crew was finishing their rounds. I liked those quiet minutes before the building woke up. That was when the system spoke the clearest. My office wasn't really an office. It was a command environment. 8 monitors, live threat feeds, anomaly detection models updating in real time. On the wall behind me hung a framed photo of the early ARPANET engineers. No awards. No degrees. Just a reminder that someone had to build the first layer of protection. The system I created was called Aegis Sentinel. It wasn't just software. It was an adaptive neural security framework protecting 17 Department of Defense data facilities across the country. Over 4 years of deployment, it had recorded 0 successful breaches. 0. The DoD contract tied to Aegis was valued at $940 million over 10 years, with performance escalators that made Vanguard one of the most stable defense contractors in the Northeast Corridor. What most executives didn't understand was that the contract wasn't really about Vanguard. It was about continuity, expertise, and trust. And trust, in cybersecurity, is not transferable overnight. At 8:53 a.m., a mandatory meeting alert appeared on my secure tablet. Company-wide. Conference hall at 9 a.m. sharp. Sender, Madison Caldwell, our new CEO. She had joined Vanguard 3 months earlier after selling a cloud-based AI startup in Silicon Valley for 9 figures. She was brilliant. Aggressive. Media-savvy. And deeply uncomfortable with anything she couldn't measure in quarterly growth. In our first private meeting, she told me, "We need to modernize. Your department feels legacy." Legacy. I remember thinking, national defense is supposed to feel legacy. By 8:59, the conference hall was packed. Engineers. Compliance officers. Program managers. Legal staff. The tension felt metallic. Madison entered at exactly 9 a.m., heels sharp against the floor, black suit tailored like armor. "Good morning, Vanguard," she said, smiling with executive warmth. She clicked through slides showing profit compression, slowed innovation cycles, and what she called over-reliance on specialized personnel. "We are restructuring to eliminate operational bottlenecks," she announced. Names began appearing on the screen. Senior engineers with 20 years of institutional knowledge. Threat analysts who'd memorized every vulnerability in our network topology. Documentation leads who could translate classified architecture into language Congress could understand. Then she paused. Looked toward the back of the room. Toward me. Dr. Natalie Grant. The room shifted. You could feel it. "Natalie's contributions are appreciated," Madison continued. "However, Aegis Sentinel is overly dependent on a single architectural authority. That's a structural risk we can't afford moving forward." A single architectural authority. I stood slowly. My pulse was steady. "May I ask a question?" I said. Briefly, she replied. Have you reviewed Section 14 of the DoD Operational Compliance Agreement? She blinked. Our legal team handles contract review. Section 14 specifies continuity of cryptographic authority and transition authentication protocols for primary system architects. A murmur spread through the room. Madison smiled thinly. No one is irreplaceable, Natalie. I held up my phone. To most, it looked like a scheduling interface. In reality, it was the biometric authentication bridge to Aegis Sentinel's core governance layer. You're right, I said calmly. No one is irreplaceable. But some systems are designed to detect instability. She laughed. Actually laughed. Are you threatening the company? No, I replied. I'm reminding you how the system was designed to respond to perceived compromise. Her expression hardened. Security will escort you out within the hour. I nodded once and walked out. No argument. No raised voice. Just physics beginning its work. Back in my office, I retrieved 2 physical journals containing handwritten logic structures that had never been digitized. Aegis deep layer adaptive heuristics existed only there. I had insisted on that. Not for ego. For resilience. As I was escorted downstairs, one of the guards, Jason, whispered, "This feels wrong." "It isn't wrong," I said quietly. "It's just incomplete." At 1:18 p.m., the first alert triggered. Unauthorized administrative query at Node Terminal 3. Aegis responded with incremental privilege contraction. At 2:07 p.m., a forced override attempt activated adaptive containment. At 3:42 p.m., cross-network authentication anomalies triggered Protocol Tier 1 lockdown. By 6:30 p.m., the system had restricted Vanguard's internal executive credentials from interacting with DoD-linked nodes. I was home when the secure line rang. "Natalie," said Colonel Daniel Reeves from the Pentagon. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I answered. The system detected instability in its command hierarchy. Facilities are reporting restricted access. The system is protecting against what it interprets as insider threat conditions. Silence. "Then, can you restore access?" I looked at the cactus on my desk. 7 years old. Somehow still alive. "Yes," I said. But not as an employee of Vanguard. At 9:12 p.m., Aegis escalated to Tier 2. Data channels began routing through encrypted isolation buffers. It wasn't attacking. It was fortifying. And the clock had started. 3 days. That's how long before Tier 3 activated. Tier 3 wasn't destruction. It was indefinite autonomous defense mode. When Madison Caldwell laughed at my warning, she thought she was eliminating a bottleneck. What she actually triggered was a system designed to survive leadership failure. And by sunrise, the Pentagon would realize something Vanguard had just learned the hard way. You can fire the architect. But you cannot fire the architecture. By 6:04 a.m. the next morning, the Pentagon had entered full contingency review. I know that because Colonel Reeves called before the sun came up. His voice was steady, but tight. "Natalie, we have 17 installations reporting restricted command interaction. Joint Oversight is asking whether this is a hostile intrusion." I sat at my kitchen table, the early light barely touching the window. "It isn't hostile," I said. "It's defensive. There's a difference, but only if you understand how adaptive systems interpret authority." "Can you brief the deputy director in person?" he asked. "Be here by 9. I wore a charcoal suit I hadn't touched in years. The kind you keep for congressional testimony or funerals. When you walk into the Pentagon as a private citizen while your creation controls access to nearly $1 billion in national infrastructure, you dress with intention. The security process was efficient. Fingerprints, retinal scan, visitor clearance. Colonel Reeves met me outside a secure conference suite. He looked like he hadn't slept. It escalated overnight, he said as we walked. Tier 2 containment expanded. Vanguard's executive credentials are fully quarantined. I nodded. That's expected behavior when the system detects inconsistent command lineage. The conference room held a dozen officials. Defense Information Systems. Cyber Command. 2 people whose affiliations weren't disclosed. Deputy Director Elaine Porter wasted no time. Dr. Grant, explain why a contractor's internal personnel decision has resulted in federal access limitations. I sat down slowly. Because Aegis Sentinel does not interpret sudden removal of cryptographic authority as a human resources action. It interprets it as potential compromise. Especially when override attempts follow immediately after. One of the legal advisors leaned forward. Are you telling us this is automatic? Yes. Can you reverse it? Yes. Then reverse it. I held her gaze. Not without restoring validated authority. The system requires continuity authentication from its primary architectural identity or a formally recognized transition protocol signed before termination. Silence. Then the deputy director asked the question that mattered. What happens if we do nothing? Tier 3 activates in 72 hours from the initial trigger, I said. At Tier 3, Aegis enters indefinite autonomous security posture. Data encryption cycles rotate continuously. Administrative privileges outside validated command structures remain suspended. The system will continue functioning. It just won't trust anyone. That room understood what that meant. A system that protects national infrastructure but doesn't trust its operator is not chaos. It's liability. By 11:30 a.m., Vanguard CEO was patched into a secure video call. Madison Caldwell looked different. Her composure was intact, but thinner. Lawyers flanked her. This is retaliation, she began. Dr. Grant engineered a backdoor dependency. I didn't react. Deputy Director Porter responded before I could. Ms. Caldwell, are you aware that Section 14 of your contract requires documented transition of cryptographic authority before termination of a primary architect? Madison hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Our legal department failed to brief you, Porter finished. Your restructuring decision triggered a national-level security containment protocol. Madison's jaw tightened. Then Dr. Grant needs to disable it. I spoke calmly. There is nothing to disable. Aegis is functioning exactly as specified. It is protecting against what it interprets as an insider threat cascade. This is absurd, she snapped. You're enjoying this. I looked directly into the camera. I don't enjoy watching preventable failure. By late afternoon, Vanguard's board of directors had convened an emergency vote. Markets react fast to instability tied to defense contracts. Their stock dropped 19% before closing. Industry publications were already speculating about compliance violations. I went home and waited. Not out of vengeance. Out of inevitability. On day 2, Tier 2 containment tightened. External audit flags appeared across 3 installations. Nothing catastrophic. But enough to cause sleeplessness in executive offices. That evening, Madison Caldwell showed up at my door. No camera crew. No board members. Just her. The confidence was gone. We need to fix this, she said. I let her in. She sat rigidly on the edge of my couch. The board is threatening removal, she admitted. The DoD is reviewing our contract viability. Our investors are panicking. Tell me what you want. I folded my hands calmly. I want you to understand what you broke. I fired an employee. You severed continuity in a system designed to interpret abrupt authority removal as hostile compromise. Her frustration surfaced. So this is punishment? No. It's architecture. She exhaled sharply. Fine. We reinstate you. Title, salary, equity. You'll have autonomy. I shook my head slowly. I won't return as your employee. She stared at me. Then what? I'll consult for 90 days. I'll oversee structured transition to a distributed authority model. After that, Aegis will operate under a multi-signature governance framework. No single executive will ever destabilize it again. She stood, pacing. The board won't like that. The board currently likes their stock price less. She left without another word. The next morning, at 7:52 a.m., I received a call from Vanguard's chairman. Dr. Grant, he said heavily, the board has voted to remove Ms. Caldwell effective immediately. There it was. Not triumph. Not revenge. Consequence. We would like to formally reinstate you, he continued. Compensation adjustment. Full operational control. I'll consult, I repeated. 90 days. After that, Aegis becomes structurally independent. By midday, I was back inside Vanguard's operations center. Not escorted. Invited. Engineers who'd been sidelined during restructuring stood waiting. Some looked relieved. Others embarrassed. I authenticated against Aegis biometric layer. The system recognized my signature instantly. Tier 2 rolled back to Tier 1 within minutes. Tier 1 dissolved an hour later. 17 facilities reported restored executive interface access. The relief in that room felt physical. Over the next 3 months, I did what I always do. I built structure. We created a cryptographic council requiring multi-layer approval for core changes. We documented deep-layer logic in secured escrow archives. We trained successors not just in code, but in philosophy. Security is not about control. It's about continuity. On my final day as consultant, there was no grand ceremony. Just engineers standing quietly as I logged out for the last time. One of them, Maria Torres, who would become Aegis' new lead architect, shook my hand and said, "You didn't just build a system. You built a standard." I smiled slightly. Standards survive people. A month later, I accepted a federal appointment to lead the newly formed Critical Infrastructure Resilience Initiative. An independent oversight body designed to prevent exactly what had just happened. We started with 12 specialists. Within a year, we had audited over 50 high-risk infrastructure systems. We weren't there to control corporations. We were there to ensure that expertise could not be casually dismissed again. 3 years passed. Aegis continued operating flawlessly under distributed governance. Vanguard recovered, leaner and humbler. Madison Caldwell left the defense sector entirely. I felt no satisfaction in that. Just clarity. One evening, while reviewing a vulnerability assessment for a power grid in the Midwest, I thought about that laugh. The one in the conference room. She thought I was warning her about my job. I wasn't. I was warning her about physics. Systems respond to instability. Architecture enforces consequence. You can remove a person. You cannot remove design logic. And here's what I've learned. The most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's resilience. It's building systems that survive poor leadership. It's ensuring that expertise is protected long after ego fades. If this story made you think, I'd love to hear your perspective. Do you believe critical systems should ever depend on a single architect? Or is distributed authority the only future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you appreciate stories about intelligence, power, and quiet strength, hit like so this reaches more people. And subscribe to the channel for more real-world narratives about leadership, accountability, and resilience. Because in the end, the systems that protect us deserve architects who refuse to disappear quietly. And I never plan to disappear.